does 53, 3 and 4. وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. That's what's written here. Means every authentic statement from the Prophet is basically equivalent to wahi.
No, unless Rasulullah indicates that this is wahi. So the verse 53, Surah 53, verses 3 and 4, this is a common misconception among the laity. They think وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ, the Prophet does not speak on his own accord. It means regular speech. So like if the Prophet tells you, bring me a glass of water, this Allah put in his mouth. So no. This is not true. And this is not true if you consider the Quran as a whole. Okay? There's a mahdhuf here. You have to insert a mahdhuf here, otherwise the rest of the Quran will not make sense. So we're not forcing something that's not there in the Quran. We're forcing it because the Quran is forcing it. So it's actually وَمَا يَنْتِقُ هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. The mahdhuf is هَذَا الْقُرْآن. So he does not speak this Quran from his pocket, from his hawa. Okay? إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. This Quran is the wahi that he's receiving from Allah. So now to explain this, you will have to consider the context of the verse. The verse is being revealed at a time when people are saying, as Allah tells you in the other surah, chapter 52, Surah Tur, the surah before this, that أَمْ يَقُولُونَ تَقَوَّلَهُ. So around the time the surah is revealed, the claim is being made that the Prophet is coming up with this Quran on his own. So that's why Allah says, أَمْ يَقُولُونَ تَقَوَّلَهُ. What? You are claiming that he has made up this Quran himself? فَلْيَأْتُوا بِحَدِيثٍ مِثْلِهِ إِنْ كَانُوا صَادِقِينَ. Let them bring a speech like it if they are truthful. So in the Meccan period, the early Meccan period, Allah and the Quran are having to deal with this claim that is constantly being repeated by the kuffar, which is that he's making up this Quran on his own. So to rebut and debunk this claim, Allah says, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. What he is presenting to you, he is not pronouncing it on his own, or he's not promulgating it or enunciating it on the basis of his whimsical desires. Rather, in huwa illa wahyun yuha. This is simply wahi that he's receiving from Allah, and he is transmitting, he is forwarding it to you as received. Okay? Now, how do we know this? That this is only about the Quran. Well, we know this from the Quran itself, because the Quran then in other surahs of the Quran, like for example, chapter 9, verse 43, Surah At-Tawbah, verse 43, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you an example which you cannot explain. If you take this verse, وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ, to mean that every word and utterance that comes out from the mouth of the Prophet is wahi, you can never explain this verse. Why? Because in verse 43 of Surah At-Tawbah, what is Allah doing? Allah is addressing the Prophet and he's saying, عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْكَ لِمَا أَذِنْتَ لَهُمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَكَ الَّذِينَ صَدَقُوا وَتَعْلَمَ الْكَاذِبِينَ. Allah is questioning the messenger. He's saying, عَفَى اللَّهُ عَنْكَ. He's saying, Allah has forgiven you. Yani, this is not a very serious offense. I have already forgiven you, but I still want to know from you, لِمَا أَذِنْتَ لَهُمْ. Why did you grant them permission? So what is he referring to? He's referring to a group of people who came to Rasulullah with false excuses, under false pretenses. They asked for permission from Rasulullah and said, Ya Rasulullah, let us stay back. You know, we have certain pressing business. We have certain emergencies that have come up. Permit us to stay back and not go with you on the jihad, on the campaign. Rasulullah was a very lenient, kind, gentle person. He's not the kind of person who probes, who becomes Sherlock Holmes when you present an excuse before him and says, let's investigate, You present an excuse, you don't want to come, he tells you, okay, fine, go, stay back. This policy of his, Allah is not in agreement with it. He says, Lima adhinta lahum. Why did you give them permission? So if you operate on the assumption that وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ, this Prophet does not speak anything, even his regular conversation, his regular discourses, everything is wahi. 24/7 Allah is sending Jibreel down and he is putting words in his mouth. If you operate with this assumption, this verse becomes illogical. It becomes actually something that does not befit Allah. Because basically then what that means is that Allah, obviously at the time the Prophet gave them permission, he must have told them something along the lines of, okay, fine, I give you permission. This word, I give you permission, who put it in his mouth? You are claiming Allah put it, because وَمَا يَنْتِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ. Okay, fine. So Allah put these words in his mouth and he told the people, I give you permission, you can go back home. Then Allah is revealing the Quran and saying, Lima adhinta lahum? Why did you let them go home? Baba, you put the words in my mouth and now you're questioning me. You type something to your computer, you type in a command, okay, you type in a sentence, and then you say, hey, Mr. Computer, why did you just, display what I typed? Baba, what you put in, input, output. So what you will put in will come out. So this is one example. The other example is in Surah Al-Anfal, chapter 8 of the Quran, verse 67, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala again questions the Prophet. Not only questions, he actually he critiques a decision of the Prophet. He says, and this is how we know this Quran is really from Allah, because if this Quran was from the Prophet, there is no way in heaven he would critique himself and undermine his own authority like that. He would never do that. So this is from Allah. That's how we know it. This is one of the divine signatures. Allah says, "Ma kana li nabiyyin an yakuna lahu asra hatta yudkhila fil ard." Allah says it does not befit, it does not behoove a messenger, a nabi, a prophet, that he should take prisoners until he has completely routed and defeated the enemy in the earth. What is Allah questioning and challenging here? He is questioning here a decision of the Prophet. After the battle of Badr, the Prophet of Allah decided to take prisoners. Allah said to him through this verse 67, he said, this goes against my policy. You went against my policy here. My policy is no prisoners until you have completely routed them and defeated them in the land. You don't take prisoners. So now the question is, when the Prophet allowed, now again, this is, if you go deep into the history, this was not exactly the Prophet's idea. There were certain companions who pressured him into this, or who made a very compelling case for the idea that they should take prisoners, because ultimately they were interested in the monetary angle, right? You take prisoners, then you can free them and earn money from that, right? So they were interested in the money. Now, Rasulullah was not interested in the money, but ultimately he was a person who used to take the suggestions and inputs that he was given seriously, and sometimes when he didn't see anything wrong in them, he would act on them. So here Allah is questioning him, how did you do that? And you are not supposed to do that. And لولا كتاب من الله سبق لمسكم فيما أخذتم فيه عذاب عظيم. Allah says, you are getting away on a technicality. See, because in this kitab, I've already told you Muslims that you have to absolutely obey the Prophet. So because of that, I'm not going to punish you, because the Prophet authorized it. So ultimately, once he authorizes it, he has given, he's acting on our behalf. So now we don't have a case against you. But if it had not been for this thing that you have done is so serious that azab azim would come, a great punishment would come, because this is a non-negotiable. As far as you cannot take prisoners. So at the time the Prophet gave authorization for this, he was receiving wahi from Allah. And if you're operating with the assumption that every word in the mouth of the Prophet that comes out from his mouth is wahi from Allah, then at the time he is giving this authorization, we assume that Allah is sending the wahi. Then if Allah sent the wahi, then what is he saying why is he challenging it then? Why is he saying, Ya Rasulullah, it does not befit you? You say, Ya Allah, what do you mean it does not befit me? You put the words in my mouth. So from this we understand, and that's why when we go to the verse of Surah Al-Najm, the verse literally is not saying that the Prophet does not speak this Quran. The Quran is not mentioned because it is understood from the context. At the time the surah was revealed, the only thing the kuffar are not saying that his regular speech is made up, or they're talking about the Quran, and they're constantly saying this Quran, the Prophet is making it up. So Allah reveals the Najmi إذا هوى ما ضل صاحبكم وما غوى وما ينطق عن الهوى. He is not presenting this to you from his hawa, from his vain desires or his whims. Rather, in huwa illa wahyun yuha. This Quran that he is presenting you with, 100% it is wahi that is being revealed on him. So that umbrella of wahi, only the Quran comes under it. And what Rasulullah claims to be wahi.